Hi from Costa Rica. Today I'm feeling inspired to talk about the ego. Ego is something that everyone has a big idea about, and it's usually, when someone has a big ego, it means they're not very pleasant to be around, really bad people or selfish people. And so when we believe that, then we try to get rid of it. But we can never get rid of it, because the one who would be getting rid of the ego is the ego. And so what is ego? Ego is a belief in the self. It's the belief that you are some sort of limited entity in a body. It is a story, essentially. It's a myth. The self is just a belief, just like you believe in Santa Claus. And once you see that it's not real, then there is nothing to do about it. Then the whole trying to kill it and trying to get rid of it, simply it's just irrelevant, because it's just irrelevant. And the ego, the self, it's believing that you are the person who lives in time. It lives in its own timeline, which is a complete dream reality. It just has nothing to do with this reality. In that reality, it has a past, and it's coming from the past, and it's going somewhere in the future. And it has to achieve something. And its main focus, the ego's main focus is, or the person's main focus is to protect its image, it's just an image anyway. It's protect its goodness. So it could be said that ego is a belief in a good person, and will do anything to either protect the goodness that we already believe we are, or will do anything to achieve that in the future. So I'm gonna give you a little example of this. Recently I was working with a client of mine, and she was going through this marriage, which was rather difficult, and she complained always that her husband was selfish. He didn't do anything, he didn't help with anything in the house, and when he finally did something, he would ask or imply this recognition, and she would feel so furious. How dares he doesn't do anything, and then when he does this one thing, he's so selfish that he asks for this recognition. And that, of course, led to a lot of suffering and disagreements, and just like a household where there was lack of love, because they just couldn't see each other. And through all these stories they had about each other. And it was interesting when she finally saw the self-image was collapsed in her story, and she saw for what it was, and she just saw this beautiful man just being there and doing stuff for her that she couldn't recognize before. But she also realized that her story, or her self-image, was of the one who never asks for recognition. She was the one who, in their household, she just does things out of pure kindness, niceness, and she never needs recognition. And so this was her ultimate ego trip. It was the one who feels ultimately superior to anyone. And it's only when she was able to see this, when that self-image collapsed, or was actually recognized that it was never real in the first place, that she was able to see her husband as he really was, without that story, without the story that tried to convince her about something else. And so that's a great example to see sometimes how we feel, in a story the ego is always better or worse. We feel always superior, or we feel like a victim, but ultimately it's this goodness that we're trying to protect. We try to look good in front of other people at all costs. And because there is some promise in the future, if we are even good enough, that finally we will get some ultimate recognition or ultimate survival. And everything what you ever wanted is just now and here, but not now and here as in this place and this time. It really now is what happens without these stories, without the self-image, without the ego, which is just a belief. When we don't believe that the voice who convinces us about something what isn't, is not ours, is not true, it's just nothing to do with what happens, it has nothing to do with you, the real you, the whole you, which is everything, then you're just left with what is this reality. And in her example, she was able to see, she was able to, for the first time, really appreciate what the husband was doing and see him without all these filters she was putting on him constantly. Without all these filters, she was able to see him, and when she started responding to him from that place, and he started responding as well. It's like it really takes only one person to change the whole dynamic in the relationship, because it's just, it's like two people are connected on an elastic band. And if you are in a relationship, and the closer relationship, there is actually no relationship. It just appears to be a relationship. So the ego is the belief that you are only one of them. And in your fantasy, or in the ego's fantasy, it's you have a certain idea about what everything should look like and what your husband should look like. And so you'll do anything to try to convince yourself that that reality is the right one, and what is, it's the incorrect one. And then you have to spend a lot of energy, time, and thinking, and overthinking, and suffering. It's enduring, it's painful, it takes all your time to change, or try to change what is. And of course, that can never be done. It's only when it's recognized, or the self-image is collapsed, it's recognized what reality really is, and you're able to be with what is. And what wasn't available before now is available, and you're free to respond, you're free to be. Suddenly there is just love and appreciation without the timeline, without the past and future and how everything should be in it. It's just such beautiful, loving magic. And it's just the story and the ego that's the belief in the doership and ownership and creditship that takes credit for what happens, that's in the way of that recognition